Hi, everyone. My name is Fathima Harris. I am a senior quality analyst. I work with ThoughtWorks. I've been working with ThoughtWorks for about 6 years now. I have experience with functional testing. I've created a lot of automation frameworks, and I've dabbled a little bit with performance testing and security testing and so on and so forth. But today, I am going to be talking about next-gen front-end testing with Chrome DevTools, DevTools in general, but in particular Chrome DevTools, and your Selenium WebDriver. So over the years, as we've been trying to automate more and more, there have been a lot of challenges that I've run into as I develop a automation framework. So I'm going to start with some common challenges that I have run into. And we'll talk about one way of tackling that solution. So to start with, the first one is network simulation. So a lot of times, when you're testing, your application looks just fine because you're testing in a very ideal network. You're sitting in your, in your office, you have good network, and so on and so forth. But what about when there are, bad network? In different network parameters, you'd want to test out how your application works, and especially given the the intent of your application. If it's the kind of application that needs to be available, even let's say underground in a metro, right? You'd want to test stuff like that, and you'd want to automate it. You wouldn't want to sit and test it manually, right? How it works in different network conditions. So that is one challenge that we had. Another one is mocking. So when you have an application that talks to multiple third-party services, when you're testing, you'd want to first test your application in isolation, right? You'd want to make sure that that your application works just right, given everybody else does what they're supposed to. So one solution that you would fall back to is using stubs and mocks. But what happens when your application grows and the number of integration also increases? Maintaining these mock servers becomes a nightmare. You'd have huge JSONs that you have to keep modifying as and when your third-party dependencies also start evolving. So maintenance becomes a huge pain in such conditions. So mocking is one challenge like that. Another one is setting geolocation. So for example, sometimes you'd have features that would work only in certain regions, and in other regions it wouldn't work at all. Or the same features would behave differently in, depending on what part of the world you're in. The more and more global we're becoming, our applications are becoming, this is a trend that you would notice. So how do you test with different locations, right? How do you set that? So that is another challenge that I've been seeing a lot. The last one is, so I'm sure some of you all would have heard about service workers. So service workers is essentially a script that runs behind your browser. What it does is it's not exactly tied to your application anymore, so regardless of whether your application is active, it's able to do certain things in the background and interact with the user. So this would let you, it gives you abilities like rich offline experiences or push notifications, as I'm sure all of you all would have seen while using some of the other application. Well, how do you test something like that? How do you interact with these service workers, and how do you test features like this? How do you automate them? So before we talk about automation, first thing that we would have to answer is, how would you even test it manually, right? Because all of these things we tend to manually verify it at least once, and then you'd want to automate it. So I'm certain that whoever has done any automation here would have used DevTools, right? At least for inspecting your application, finding out locators for your Selenium test or whichever tests that you're writing. Additionally, your DevTools is a browser instrumentation tool. It helps you inspect, debug, profile your browser, and so on and so forth. so what do we do with that, right? It just gives you so many uh, possibilities, right? You have, so once you right-click on your browser, you do an inspect or you open your DevTools, you have multiple tabs within it, right? You have your network tab, your console tab, your applications tab. Your network tab is what you would use to see what are the different network requests that are being made. If you have played around with it a little bit, you'd even see that you can even interact with it. You can actually replay certain requests if you want to, and there are multiple things that you can do with it. So with DevTools, it's not just inspecting or debugging what's happening, but you can also interact with it, and you can it helps you do certain things, like, for example, clear your local cache, right? These are things that the DevTools let you do. So for Chrome, how Chrome DevTools work is it uses Chrome DevTools protocol. So it allows you to instrument, inspect, debug, and profile the browser, like I said earlier. The cool thing is that these APIs are exposed. So if you'd want to, you would be able to use them as well. Now, this is made possible because you have something called remote debugging protocol, with which you can actually remotely debug your browser. So these are some examples of the different capabilities that DevTools come with, and I'm certain that we've all interacted with these, right? Like your performance tab will actually, you can actually profile your application, see what kind of, like how long did it take for your application to load, and it's not as simple as that. It actually breaks it down to your first meaningful load, and so on and so forth. So that's your that's your performance tab. Your network, like I said earlier, you can see your network requests, you see your console from your, what's happening there, and yeah, the applications are huge. So so that's cool that all of this is there. But if you had to programmatically talk to your Chrome DevTools, how do you do that? How you do that is with WebSocket protocol. So WebSocket protocol is a little different from the usual RESTful calls that we make, because it's a two-way communication between a web browser and any server that's there. What that means is that you don't have to wait for a server to make a request to give it some information back. It's a two-way communication, so it can actually push information onto you. So that is about your WebSocket protocol. So all you need is a WebSocket client, and with that, you'll be able to talk to your Chrome DevTools protocol. So that is cool. And I'll show you how exactly you make that connection. But before that, I'm going to explain what a WebSocket object would look like when you're communicating with CDP. Because we're going to use this a lot going forward. So this is the structure of a WebSocket object. It has mainly three parts: the ID, method, and the params. ID is just an arbitrary number. It's just the identifier of the request. Then you have something called your method. And so the method is actually the API that you would use to perform whatever action. So in this case, I will be showing you this very soon. What we're going to do is we're going to be clearing application storage. So the domain here, as you can see, is storage. And the API is clear data for origin. So that's the method. And the params, now this is a list that varies depending on the API that you would be using. In this case, you would have to specify what is the origin or the URL where you want to clear the data from, and what kind of, what is the type of storage that you want to clear. In this case, we're saying we want to clear all. So I will show you a demo, and I'll show you how exactly we can make this communication. So what I'll do is, so I have this website loaded, and I will open our Chrome DevTools. And if I go to application, you can see that there is some data over here, right? And if you go to the local storage, you can see specifically it's for the, let me just close this. Yeah, it's specifically for the website that I have opened. So what I'm going to do is I will open something called the protocol monitor. So this is something that your Chrome DevTools comes with, but you would have to enable the experimental feature over here and add this there so that you can see it. But what this does is it's very similar to your network tab that's there, where you use network tab to see what are the network requests that are being made. The protocol monitor, what it shows you is what is the request that Chrome DevTools makes to do whatever action that you are performing here. So I'll show you. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and clear this storage. So you can see as I'm doing different actions, the protocol monitor is filling up there. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this. And because I know what, sorry. So now you actually can see what is the, so this network, protocol monitor is divided into 3 parts: the method, request, and response. The method is what's going to tell you, which domain, that is storage, and which API under that domain you need to use, which is clear data for origin. Now it also tells you the request body, right? And this is what I just showed you, the WebSocket object that we need. So you'll get that from here. Now, this might not be sufficient information. You would still want to understand what are the other options that I can send in this object. So if you want to do that, what you can do is you can just right-click on it, and you can go to documentation. And this will open up the Chrome DevTools protocol. It'll open this up for you. And it'll actually take you to that specific API that you are interested in, which in this case is storage .clear data for origin. And this will tell you a little bit about what this API does. So just a little bit of brief about what this documentation is like. So you can see on the left-hand side, you have a lot of groupings there. You have browser, debugger, emulation, network, performance, and so on and so forth. This is very similar to the tabs that you see when you open your DevTools. So what they've done is they've grouped different APIs, and they've put it under different domains. And it's the different domains that are listed over there. So when you're exploring this out, that's how you'd want to go about it. So, so now what we have is we have the ability to create the request payload over here, right? So now that we have that, what do we need next? Next, we need to open up your browser instance. But you also want to debug that, right? You want to be able to connect it. So you'll have to open it a little differently. And let me, oops, give me a second. So what I do is I'm going to open Google Chrome, and I will just specify what port I want the debugging enabled, and I will open that, and this has opened up. And sorry about that, it wasn't supposed to. Oops. Okay, never mind. So I'm just going to load this here. So this is the one that I have instantiated, and we'll just keep it here. We'll see if the memory has loaded. It has. So now you have the browser. You know what is the payload. The only thing that's pending is you need the URL to make that connection, and then go ahead and make that connection. Now how you do that is, sorry. Oops. Okay, never mind. So you go to localhost 922 and hit JSON/list, and this will give you a list of whatever is open right here. And what you will be interested in is the WebSocket debugger URL. All right. So you will go ahead and open this. Now I have multiple of them open, so now I'm going to have to figure out which one's going to work for me. So I'm going to go to this. Sorry. Yeah. So so now that I have the URL as well, what I need to do is now I have to go ahead and make that connection, right? So so there are multiple WebSocket clients that are available out there. I have just chosen a Chrome extension that it's called Smart WebSocket Client. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste this WebSocket URL here, and I'm going to make the connection. So there's a chance that I'm looking at the wrong URL, so bear with me. And now I have gone ahead and pre-filled the object over here. Now all that's left to do is for us to go ahead and send or push this message. So let me go and do that. All right, you can see, so my ID was this, and I have gotten a response here for that particular ID, so I know that this message has been pushed, and we have a response. And let me find that tab. Oh, it's here. No? Yeah. It's here, and you can see that it has cleared. So whatever we did manually in the beginning with the protocol monitor on, you were able to actually do that by making a WebSocket connection. I hope this is clear, and this will bring us to the end of our first demo. So just a quick recap of what we just did. So we had our browser open with remote debugging on. We then we created a WebSocket object with the help of protocol monitor and whatever documentation is there. And then all you had to do is get a WebSocket client and make a connection with the debugger URL that you found from that URL, right? All right. So this is cool, this means that now you can programmatically do whatever it is that whatever interaction that you have with Chrome DevTools, you will now be able to do it in your automation frameworks as well. Given that WebDriver is one of the most commonly used browser automation tool, I will give an example with that, but this is possible with other tools as well, and we'll talk about that towards the end as well. So before we talk about how we integrate WebDriver and Chrome DevTools, let's just do a quick revision of what your WebDriver architecture looks like. So it's pretty straightforward. You have your language-specific clients here. So it could be your Java binding, your Python, or your Node.js, so on and so forth, whatever. So this is where you actually make you specify what user interaction you want to do, right? Like, for example, your browser.click or driver.navigate, or so on and so forth. So that's the client bit. Now, once you specify what action you want to do, now WebDriver gets that request, it understands it, and then it has to interact with your browsers. And how does it do that? It does that via a browser-specific driver. So you have your multiple browsers, right? Your Chrome, your Firefox, Safari, and so on and so forth. And each of these have a very specific driver to execute those instructions, right? So that is your WebDriver. So now WebDriver has this capability of talking to a browser via a JSON protocol. With Selenium 4, that has been revised to W3C protocol. But that's how it does that. But what if you could also make a parallel connection while this is happening, make a WebSocket connection. So now this was not, making such connection was actually not possible until Chrome 63. With Chrome 63 and above, there was this new feature that got added. It's called multi-client remote debugging protocol, which means multiple clients can now interact with a single browser. And you can do whatever it is that you want to do with your Chrome DevTools protocol. So this now opens up a lot of avenues for us, because whatever capabilities that DevTools come with, which is very, very powerful, right, is now things that you can actually get your browser, your automated tests to do as well. So all you need to do is set that up. Just get your test to give the capability of making a WebSocket connection, and that's all you need to do. So we'll jump into another demo, and we'll see how that's possible with WebDriver. All right. So, I am going to do this demo in 2 sets. I will show you first on how we can do something with Selenium 3. I'll also show you how we can do similar things with Selenium 4 as well, and I'll tell you why in just a little bit. So first, the first test is going to be what, I'm going to try and automate whatever it is that we saw in the first demo, where you'll be able to clear your data, right? So I'm sure this would look pretty similar or very familiar to the normal test that you write, because you would have a driver object with which you would, do normal actions like navigate and click and, fill things or whatever. So that part remains the same. Like I said earlier, the only additional thing that you need to do is be able to make that WebSocket connection. And that's exactly what we do here. So I'm using a library with which I will be able to make that WebSocket connection. And first thing that you need to do is, if you remember, we got the WebSocket debugger URL so that you can interact with that specific instance. So that's what we do here. We get the debugger URL. So now you have that. You anyway open up your browser, right? So that's done too. Now the only thing that's pending is for you to make that or construct that WebSocket object. So we already know what the object looks like, right? So you need to specify your ID, your method, and your parents. So you could give just about any number here, so we dynamically generate that. You specify the method, which in our case is the clear data for origin API under the storage domain. And we have 2 parents, origin and storage types. And I specified the URL that I want to, clear the data from and what type. And then I go ahead and send that message, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to run this test. And it has loaded. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the inspect, all right, and go to application, and if you see, your data is cleared. And this is exactly what we did manually and through making that WebSocket connection, right? And just like that, you were able to do that. So I will show you one more example in Selenium 3 itself with the example of mocking. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the DelEx conference website that's there, and I'm going to intercept all the requests to fetch an image, and I'm going to give it my own image and mock the response, right? So we'll see how we do that. So I've just, so this is the response that I wanted to give, so I've just encoded that and constructed that from an image. And then what you would need to do is you will have to build the WebSocket object, right? So I hope this is visible. Okay. So you pass in your ID. The method in this case is the API is set request interception. It's under the network domain. And you have multiple parameters again. So you just specify what is the URL pattern here. All right. And all that's left to do is go ahead and make that request with, right? And I am going to go ahead and run this test. So let's see what happens. All right, so the application has loaded. If I scroll down, you can see all the images have now been replaced with the logo, right? So this, of course, is just an example. The reason why I chose this for the demo is so that it's very visible that you can actually intercept these requests. But the application for you would be, you could just basically mock any third-party interaction that's there within the test, just like that, right? You don't have to maintain any mock servers or whatever. So you achieve that with code that's just this much. So this was Selenium 3. With Selenium 4, things have become a little bit more simplified. What Selenium 4 comes with is some built-in support for Chrome DevTools interaction. So there are there are quite a few APIs that Selenium 4 itself supports. One catch there, though, is that it doesn't support all of the APIs that are there because, first of all, there are a lot of them. We saw how many domains were there in the documentation, right? And within each domain, you have multiple APIs as well. So there's a lot of them. And secondly, some of these are experimental, so it doesn't make sense for Selenium to, support them because there's a very good chance some of these could get deprecated, right? So Selenium 4 has given us another capability of, like, in case you want to use an API that's not supported out of the box, you should still be able to, make your own requests without really bothering about creating a WebSocket connection and all of that. So I will show you an example where you can use something that's built in and also construct your own messages with Selenium 4. So for the first example, I'll show you how we can simulate some network conditions. So DevTools is actually something now that you will get from Selenium 4 itself. So you will use something called emulate network conditions. So you can see it has multiple parameters here. It takes whether you want it to be offline or not. I've given false. You can specify your latency, your download throughput, your upload throughput, and also what type of connection you want it to be. So if you've played around with this, I'm sure you would be familiar with the different options that are there. You have 2G, 3G, 4G, fast 3G, and so on and so forth. There are multiple options there. So I've given something that's really slow. And I will run this. Wait, sorry. Oh no, don't debug. So just remember how quickly the DelEx site loaded earlier, right? And now it's going to take a while because I gave a really low configuration. So now, if you remember the loops that we had to jump through to get our WebSocket connection in Selenium 3, no, you didn't have to do any of that. All you needed to do was just pick the right API, fill in the parameters, and you were done, right? So it is as simple as that. So I will now show you how can you do the same thing if this API was not supported. I'm just going to go ahead and close this because it's going to take a long time to load this. But I hope it's very clear that you have actually managed to achieve network throttling. So let me go ahead and stop that here. All right. And I'll do the exact same thing with something called execute CDP command. Now this is the API that is exposed where it's very generic. It takes in two parameters. One is the method, and the other one is the parameters. So I have something called a message builder that builds my WebSocket objects however I want. So we'll see how I achieve this. So I now already know what my domain is, what my API is. I'm just gonna construct the parameters and just send that in. One thing that I've done differently a little bit is I've increased the download throughput so that you can see that I am actually able to tune the speed to my liking. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this. Same thing, it's gonna visit Google first. Then it will change the network speed, and it will visit DelEx. So this time, it's going to be a little faster because I have increased the download speed by 10. So I'm hoping it would come up very soon. But I hope it's clear that what are the two different ways in which you can interact with Chrome DevTools within Selenium 4 in itself. So you can see it took a while longer than our initial load when I didn't do any throttling, but faster than the previous one, right? Now, I would like to show one more example of, like a test, and then we can go back to the slides. So the last thing that I would like to show is we talked about setting different geolocations, right? Like you'd want to, what if you have region-based features? How do you test that? So I will show you an example of how you can set that. So before that, I am using this. Let me just quickly, let's close this, show you where we are first. So there's this website that will actually tell you, if you click on where am I, it'll give you your latitude and longitude over here. And we probably won't understand any of that, so we'll just look at the map. And it shows us where we are, right? So we know this, this is how it works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the same, I'm going to use the same website, but I'm going to give it my own location. And with the help of the map, we'll see if it is taking that up or not. So again, the only little bit of challenge over here, a tricky portion is for you to identify which domain and API you want to use and just construct it, right? That's the only thing that you really need to do. So how you do that in this case is this something called set geolocation override. This is under the emulation domain. It takes 3 parameters, your latitude, longitude, and your accuracy. I have set it to 27 something, 78 something. It's a specific location. We'll see where that is exactly. Let's go ahead and run it. All right, so you can see that it has taken the latitude and longitude here. And if I clicked, it thinks we're in Taj Mahal, right? So now you have actually, now you have control over where your application thinks it is, right? And you can test accordingly. So that would be the end of our demo. So just doing a quick recap, we saw 2 sets of examples, one with Selenium 3 and the other with Selenium 4. The tricky part with Selenium 3 was you had to make the WebSocket connection by yourself. Not too hard, very doable, but you have to do it. With Selenium 4, this is now inbuilt. You don't have to worry about the WebSocket part. There are 2 ways to do it. One is use the out-of-the-box APIs that it gives. But if you want to explore a little bit more, you also have execute CDP Command, with which you can do whatever it is that you'd like to do. So this was with Selenium WebDriver. This is also possible with some other open source tools as well. Like, for example, your Puppeteer. Your Puppeteer is actually a node library which is built on top of your Chrome DevTools protocol. So it's right there. It's pretty close to CDP, and you have all of this out of the box available. The same thing is true for WebDriver IO as well. It also internally uses Puppeteer, so you have that over there. And finally, you also have a browser automation tool called Tycho. Again, is built on top of Chrome DevTools protocol. Now, one thing to remember is that all of this right now is, we did talk about Chrome specifically, or Chrome DevTools specifically. But CDP is something that is actually being adopted more and more by other browsers as well, like your Firefox. Even Edge is in the process of adopting that. So that really opens up a lot of possibilities for you. Now, depending on what application you have, what is the environment that you're in now, if you already have a lot of, Selenium tests, existing tests, and you have new features like this coming in, then you would want to, just integrate your existing tests with something like this. But if you're, choosing a new tool, then you could really explore and see what works for you and what doesn't. Right, and with that, I think that brings us to the end of my presentation. I hope that made some sense for y'all. I'm open to taking any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Do you have a question? Okay. Feel free, please.
Hello and thank you. I have one question about does it, for Selenium 3, does Chrome DevTools support parallel runs? So can I run my Chrome images on one machine and don't use Docker, for example? How about parallel?
Are you asking with Chrome DevTools or just generally?
I ask about Chrome DevTools. Can I start Chrome DevTools in debug mode, like on several protocol ports of my machine or not?
Yes. So because of the multi-client debugging protocol that's enabled, so this is available only from Chrome 63 and above. So as long as you're doing that, it should be possible for you to make multiple connections, which means you can run your tests parallelly as well. Any other questions?
Hello, my name is Mikita. And what about other browsers? Did you try the same, but not for Chrome? Because Chrome has already DevTools, but yeah, for something else.
Right. This is something that I've been meaning to try, but I haven't gotten around to it. But this should be possible for any DevTools that exposes their API, right? So especially given that other browsers are adopting the same Chrome DevTools, you should be able to use it. So all you need to do is, theoretically, you should just have to change your driver, and you should be able to do the same thing.
But in Selenium 4, this support is only for Chrome specific?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
No problem.
Hello, thanks for your presentation. I want to ask a question, maybe a little from your experience of integrating this Chrome DevTools into Selenium tests. Maybe you can suggest, what is a better way to integrate it? Do you create some, usually we have to support cross-browser testing, yeah, and do you create some separate tests for this, or you integrate it inside your existing tests and do some if-else and so on?
That's a good question. So to be honest, so the first thing that crossed my mind when I saw this capability was that, okay, this is only going to work for Chrome, right? So, which is why I said you really have to evaluate how well this works for you. Now, if lately, the last two projects that I worked on, the client specifically said that we just want to support, most of the people and not all were okay with that. So they were okay with just having these tests for Chrome. So then it made sense to just do this. You don't have to think about it. But if you do want to go ahead and look for support for other browsers as well. Now, if it is other browsers that have adopted Chrome DevTools, then your problem is solved. This would still work. Otherwise, what I would do is, let's say, for example, and this is something that I did 3 projects ago, where the performance baselining is performance was a very, very critical thing. So of course we had stress testing and performance testing and all of that in our higher environments. But one thing that we did was this is before this CDP. But what we did do was at the time we just use our a few of our functional tests. We added loggers there to record the time. The reason why we did that was to create a benchmarking of sorts, and what we did was we make sure that the performance is not degraded in each check-in. Now, of course, this varies from browser to browser, but if you just want to do a quick thing where you don't have a lot of time to invest, what I would do is I would just do this for my Chrome tests only, and I would assume that, okay, if this works properly, if the performance hasn't degraded for Chrome, I would imagine it's the same for, let's say, a Firefox as well. But of course, you are going with an assumption, and it really depends on how much time you have to invest. So this would be the quickest way to achieve that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I have one question about DevTool conditions and Selenium Grid.
Okay.
Do you use Selenium Grid and some condition from DevTools. Because I know what some condition not working with the grid.
Okay.
Maybe you have some solutions for it.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, you're asking if this would still work with Chrome,
Yeah.
sorry, with Selenium
Grid.
Grid, because there are things that may or may not work there, right?
Yeah.
So I have not tried this out in Selenium Grid, but I don't think there should be any problem because the way that this is your WebSocket connections are running in the background and they're very non-disruptive to your test. So there aren't any conditions, as far as I know, as long as you're able to get the debugger URL, because all you need to do is the ability to make that connection. So theoretically, no, but I have not tried this out. Unfortunately, I've been working on a lot of backend projects recently, so I haven't tested this out at scale. But I don't anticipate any errors.
Okay, thank you. Because we have some issues with network settings on grid.
Okay, right.
Thank you.
It's possible. I'm sure you'd only run into it when you actually implement it. So.
Hi. Maybe you know if there is a chance using CDP to get HTTP traffic for a session or for a specific test?
There definitely is. So, so what you're trying to say is you want the session details from a particular request?
Hold the traffic. You know, maybe you heard about the HAR extension, which stands for HTTP Traffic Archive.
Okay.
So basically, you want to see in some log file all the requests that happened during your test or your browser session.
Okay. So I think that should be, so you basically want to read all the requests that are being processed within a session, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, you should be able to do that with the network tab, I believe.
So basically, what now we do is we usually use proxy to record that stuff.
Right.
Maybe there is an easier way to do it through
exactly.
the CDP.
So you will, whatever it is that you're able to do from, so the rule of thumb, right, is that whatever you can see on your DevTools, you will be able to see on your, your tests as well, because you'll be able to read exactly that because you're connecting to that directly. So you should be able to do that.
Thanks.
No problem.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question about, can you catch some request, Ajax maybe, from a page, catch it on a fly, modify it, and send it
Yes.
all the way?
So the second example, I think, where I got the DelEx website to load all the logos there, that's exactly what I did. So I intercepted the request. So you can target a specific request or a type of request that your browser is making. You can ask it to just forget about what the response is, give this particular response that you want to give, and you should be able to do that. So that's the network domain set interception. I forget the name, but that's the API that you would want to use for that.
Thank you.
No problem.